Not a week goes by that some national pundit does not decide to chime in on Marquise Hollywood Brown and the Kansas City Chiefs turning things up a notch with this offense for the 2024 season. Seemingly not a half a week goes by that this doesn't happen. We have another article today. What are they saying? And is what they are saying true? Well, today's article comes to us from the Bleacher Report. It is titled 9 Players Who Will Live Up to the Hype, the Offseason Hype in 2024. The player in question for the Kansas City Chiefs, one of 9 players total, named in the article is wide receiver Marquise Brown. And this is what the article suggests. Wide receiver Marquise Brown wasn't one of the biggest names to change teams this offseason, but he could have a major impact because of the situation in which he's landing. The Oklahoma product has signed a 1-year deal with the Kansas City Chiefs, where he'll now catch passes from Patrick Mahomes. According to the star quarterback, Brown is poised to be a difference maker.
I've seen it in the offseason, from working in Texas to here,
Mahomes told reporters.
I'm giving him chances down the field, and he's making the plays happen. The more plays he makes, the more we'll continue to give him those chances. He's a good addition to our offense.
Had Brown landed with a different franchise, it would be easy to ignore the hype. He had just one 1,000-yard season with the Baltimore Ravens and largely underwhelmed after being traded to the Arizona Cardinals. His speedy skill set also overlaps a bit with rookie first-round pick Xavier Worthy. However, Brown's ability to stretch the field and create space on crossing routes, along with his veteran experience, will add new elements to the Kansas City offense in 2024. Chiefs head coach Andy Reid remains one of the league's most creative play callers, and he'll know how to take full advantage of what the 27-year-old can offer. Having Mahomes under center certainly won't hurt. Neither will building trust with him during the offseason. Brown could be in line for a career year. Now, here's the interesting, on this side of things, from my perspective, the interesting thing about this article is it makes absolutely no new ground. It makes no real assertions. What I always, I promise you, I'm complaining for a reason here. What I always try to do with this channel is come to you with 2 of 3 things. I try to have a source, I try to have numbers, and I try to have an opinion. Now, sometimes what we get is just numbers and opinions. If I'm going to forsake one of that triumvirate, it will be a source. I don't have to have a source to agree with me to hold my own opinion, but I'll try to have a source for something in a video. Guys, I don't know how many articles I have read this offseason, especially since the acquirement of wide receiver Marquise Hollywood Brown, that basically just list facts. Maybe a quote from a player isn't really a source. Why? Because players never really say anything, and you can't blame them. Why would they? Why would they give the media something to work with? Here is my goal for this video. We're going to ask the question, so what would it look like to live up to the hype? The article does a great job of titling itself, saying that these are 9 players who will live up to the offseason hype in 2024, then goes to maybe lay the case that there has been hype for Marquise Hollywood Brown, but does not bring home what that would look like, what that hype really is. So I put together a few numbers to say, what would that hype look like? What would a good season be from Marquise Hollywood Brown? I think that a good season would give the Kansas City Chiefs their first 1,000-yard receiver since 2021. 60 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Certainly, this is a doable task for Marquise Brown. Certainly, this is something that he can do on the field. He's done something comparable to this in the past, and we will get to what it is that he did in the past in a little bit. This would give him a 16.67 yard per reception average. That's a great average. That is a very high average per reception, especially for a guy going over the 1,000 yard mark. But it is not without precedent. It is not completely undoable, especially if we imagine that the Kansas City Chiefs will be doing largely what we talked about yesterday, in the video that I posted, where between the 20s, Marquise Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy are going to be running 100-meter relays. They're just going to be dashing down the field. And once we get into the red zone, or once we're stuck in the opponent's red zone, it'll probably be a healthy dose of Travis Kelce, Jared Wiley, and Isaiah Pacheco. So that's a good season. That would be, I think, a good season for Marquise Brown. I don't think anyone would really complain if Marquise Brown went 60 for 1,008 touchdowns. What is the hype, though? This is the type of season that I think we're talking about when we are envisioning the hype that this signing has caused. I think you're talking about 80 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns. That's the type of season that the hype for this has been. Now, the average on this season, 80 receptions, 1,300 yards, comes down nominally to 16.25 yards per reception. Catching 20 more passes and 2 more touchdowns is a pretty good rate. I think this is the type of hype season we're talking about if Marquise Hollywood Brown were to live up to the hype that has been put forth by his signing in Kansas City, pairing the biggest and most live arm in the NFL, currently, I believe, I have to imagine, the winningest quarterback active in the NFL, a guy who has never won fewer games than he won last season. So, I believe he would be the winningest active quarterback in the NFL with one of the best, most exciting deep threats as of a couple of seasons ago. I think most of the hype for Marquise Brown died in the desert in Arizona. So I think that 80 receptions, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns is really the base for the hype. Will he live up to that? I think it's possible. I really do. We will look at what other players have done, and we will look at what Marquise Brown has done in the past in just a moment. What would a great season be for Hollywood Brown? This would be exceeding expectations. This would be exceeding the hype. 95 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 13 touchdowns. So again, you're talking about that average coming down just a little bit to 15.79 yards per reception. You're talking about 15 more receptions and 3 more touchdowns. What this would mean, what this type of season would mean. So this is a Tyreek Hill type season. In the time since Tyreek Hill has been here, Patrick Mahomes has proven his mettle as a quarterback to the nth degree. Is he putting up the same stats that he did with Tyreek Hill in the offense? Absolutely not. Well, he did once. I mean, that 2022 season, those stats were incredible regardless of what it looked like that he was throwing, what the wide receiver core looked like to whom he was throwing the ball. But he's not been as active. Even with those numbers that he put up, it didn't feel the same here in Kansas City. You did not always sit at the edge of your seat when the Chiefs were on offense, when the Chiefs had the ball. If if Hollywood Brown has a 95 reception, 1,500 yard, 13 touchdown season, that is exceeding expectations. That is getting into Tyreek Hill territory. Do I think that Hollywood Brown is as good as Tyreek Hill? I do not. I think that the surrounding cast that he has around him this year is at least more compelling than what it was that Tyreek Hill was working amongst. But I also believe that Patrick Mahomes has proven himself a better passer of the ball. Part of what this means is when Patrick Mahomes had both Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill on the field, why would you target anyone else? Now, initially he did, right? In the 2019-2020 seasons, he started getting himself into a little bit of trouble depending on the Tyreek Hills of the world, just throwing it up there and assuming Tyreek Hill would come down with the ball, throwing it up there and assuming that Travis Kelce would come down with the ball. And why wouldn't you, except that it eventually becomes detrimental to the offense because defenses will adjust. And so in the year that the Kansas City Chiefs allegedly lost a Super Bowl, allegedly to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, there was a meeting earlier in the season with those same Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the game started off looking as if it was going to be a record-setting outing. It looked like it was going to be a routing for the ages. And then that routing never came. The second half of that game was something of a disaster and nearly ended in disaster. Maybe not nearly ended in disaster, but could have, certainly more realistically in the second half than the first half, ended in disaster. I'm going to be 100% honest, I don't remember exactly how that game ended. Maybe it was closer to nearly than I am remembering at the time, but that game proved that a team can really adjust to what the Chiefs were doing on offense at that time. And they did. And things nearly crashed down around them. What this great season of 95 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 13 touchdowns would indicate is that Patrick Mahomes is putting into implementation all of those things that he has learned along the way. So let's look at a few other numbers to try to contextualize what these seasons, good, hype, and great, would mean. Marquise Hollywood Brown's personal record season is 91 receptions. That is much closer to the great season than any of the other seasons. That same year, he put up 1,008 yards, which is closer, much closer, almost exactly on the good season, the low end of these seasons. And his personal record 8 touchdowns came actually the year before, 91 receptions and 1,008 yards, which again puts him right at that good category. So maybe you want to argue with what good, hype, and great numbers would be, but the most that we have from Hollywood Brown is nearly the great receptions, nearly a little bit exceeding the good yards, and right on the good touchdowns. So for Marquise Hollywood Brown to live up to the hype numbers here, 80 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns, he would be setting personal records in 2 of those 3 categories, yards and touchdowns. He has had a 91 reception season. What are we talking about when we're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs over the last 2 seasons and what their primary receiver has done over that time? In 2023, it was Rashee Rice with 79 receptions, 938 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Again, we have an interesting sort of compilation of these 3 type good, hype, great seasons. 79 receptions puts him basically right on the same hype season as what we're talking about with Hollywood Brown for the 2024 season. However, 938 yards sets him a little bit short of the good season stat for 1,000 yards even. And 7 touchdowns sets him just one shy of the good season that we are forecasting for Marquise Brown. Now, do we think... So Rashee Rice at some point last season, around the midseason point, became the number one target for Patrick Mahomes as far as wide receivers are concerned in this offense. I think that is fairly standard, right? I don't think there's any arguing really with that. After the point where Rashee Rice became the number one target, he was the number one guy. These are the numbers that he put up. Do we believe that Hollywood Brown, in his initial run with the Kansas City Chiefs, can do better than this? I do. And look, those numbers are basically right at what we would accept for Hollywood Brown's season with the Kansas City Chiefs. Can he outdo that? I believe so. I think he can have a better season than Rashee Rice last season. Back in 2022, Juju Smith-Schuster had 78 receptions, 933 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, Juju missed a few games, but look at how stunningly similar those two stat lines are. Missing the few games, that offense had problems getting the football into the end zone in general. So that 3 touchdown number is what it is. That season was kind of a weird one. 79 receptions for Rice, 78 receptions in 2022 for Juju Smith-Schuster. 938 yards for Rice in 2023, 933 for Juju Smith-Schuster in 2022, and then the 7-2 disparity there. Do we really believe that Patrick Mahomes, with the greatest deep ball arm possibly in the history of football, is going to let a guy like Marquise Hollywood Brown come into this offense and have a worse season than both Rashee Rice, who ran a 4.51 40-yard dash, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who I believe was a 4.57 guy or something weird with Juju Smith-Schuster? Do we really believe that Patrick Mahomes is going to let a legitimate deep threat come into this offense and have fewer yards, fewer receptions, fewer touchdowns than these guys who are possession-wide receivers? Juju Smith-Schuster with a 4.54 40-yard dash, pardon me. I don't think so. I think that what we're going to have from Hollywood Brown is more than those 79 and 78 receptions. I think he's going to be closer to his own career high and that great number of 95, his career high of 91. It depends on how this offense really ends up using him. Will he be a deep threat in this offense, or will he be more of a 12 to 18 yard downfield possession receiver? If you look at his career high 91 receptions and 1,008 yards, and you keep into consideration those were the same season. The 8 touchdowns were the season before, but those 91 receptions for 1,008 yards were the same season, making it an 11.08 yard per reception average. Is he going to be utilized by the Chiefs offense in that fashion, or as a true deep threat? If he has so 60 receptions, 1,000 yards is a 16.67 yard average. If he has that on 95 receptions, that would give him 1,583 yards. If he keeps up that same 16.66 yards per reception average over 95 receptions as opposed to 60 receptions, that 16.66, 16.67 yard reception mark, I think you have to concede is a deep threat receiver type number. So these are the numbers that we're looking at when we ask, will Marquise Hollywood Brown fulfill the hype that he has caused this offseason, or will he fall somewhere short of that? It's my opinion that hype season of 80 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns is certainly well within reason, is certainly well within the confines of what might happen here in Kansas City, is certainly within the confines of what might come true this season if he's able to stay on the field. That's all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. The Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, having posted a video for over 450 days consecutively on the Kansas City Chiefs. And so I hope to have you back for the next one. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already. And if you want to help me out further, there's a link to my Patreon to be found in the description below.